Hi everyone, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. A nighttime stroll turns into a tragic crime. Going anywhere with someone you barely know is generally a bad idea that often ends poorly, especially when you're in a foreign city, and the acquaintance was made just a couple of hours ago at a local entertainment venue. It's not necessarily, though not excluded, that the casual friend will turn out to be a maniac, assailant, or robber, but they might accidentally or intentionally draw you into troubles, or even lead to a disaster. An American student named Marisela Botella Valadez planned to simply have a good time at a popular nightclub, where she unexpectedly met an aspiring rapper who showed interest in her and suggested they continue the evening in a more intimate setting. However, the new acquaintance was already in a relationship, and a complicated one at that. He was part of a rather unusual love triangle, and the other participants did not appreciate the sudden appearance of the young beauty. Her naive trust cost the young woman her life, but the case turned out to be anything but straightforward. It involved insane jealousy, the desire to cling to fading youth, occult practices, and even an international search for fugitive criminals. Nevertheless, thanks to the Herculean efforts of the investigators, it was possible to find all participants of the crime and establish the role of each. What is known about Marisela? Marisela Botella Valadez was born in 1997 in Seattle, the largest city in the state of Washington. She was the eldest of two children in a family of Latin American descent, raised alongside her younger brother. People described her as a sweet, sociable young woman who always had many friends, performed well in school, and after graduating, became a student at a prestigious university. Furthermore, Marisela was considered truly beautiful, petite, slim brunette with big brown eyes, luxurious hair, and a flawless figure. She always had a host of admirers, loved being the center of attention, enjoyed lively parties where she could have fun, and cherished every day. On Saturday, October 3rd, 2020, the student flew to Dallas to meet up with old friends. However, by Monday morning, she planned to return. Her brother was supposed to meet her at the airport on October 5th, after which they would head to the university together, but the plane arrived without her. The search for the missing student. When all the passengers from the flight arriving from Dallas had left the airport, her brother realized that Marisela was not among them. Concerned, the young man tried to call his sister, but her phone was turned off. He then called their parents to inform them about the situation. Since Marisela was a serious and responsible young woman, it was out of character for her to disappear without warning and not show up for university classes. The family started calling her friends in Dallas, trying to find out where she might have gone and where she was last seen. It turned out that the night before, she had been partying at one of the city's most popular clubs, where she met a black man named Chuck. The pair danced, enjoyed themselves, and had alcoholic drinks, after which they disappeared together. Marisela was not seen again, and her phone went unanswered. The information seriously alarmed and frightened her parents, so they immediately decided to report her disappearance to the police. It turned out that the young woman had indeed bought tickets for a flight to Seattle, but for some reason she had not boarded the plane. No one had seen her since that night, and no one knew where she might be. It was necessary to find out who Marisela's new acquaintance was, where they had gone, and whether she had gone with him willingly. Examining footage from external surveillance cameras located around the club, law enforcement officers saw the missing student leaving with a young man whose face could not be clearly seen on the video. According to the footage, she appeared to be walking with him voluntarily. The pair got into a black Audi car and drove off in an unknown direction. The mysterious new friend. Since the disappearance of 23-year-old Botella Valadez, several days had passed, and she had still not contacted anyone, nor had she logged into her social media accounts, and there were no transactions on her bank cards. The police needed to identify the stranger she had left with as soon as possible to understand where to look for them. One of her missing friends mentioned that her companion was possibly named Chuck, but that information was insufficient. Soon, thanks to the street camera footage, it was possible to determine the direction the car had traveled. Additionally, it turned out that the pair had stopped at a supermarket, where they also appeared on camera footage. Both looked happy, smiling, and showing affection for each other. The young woman picked out several drinks and candies, and the young man paid for everything at the checkout using a card in the name of Charles Beltran. Thus, it became clear who Marisela had left with. Beltran was a 31-year-old musician and even considered a rising local rap star. However, the man had a criminal past, having been incarcerated twice for robbery and armed assault. He had served less than 3 years and was released on parole. Recently, the young man's career was on the rise, and he was even preparing to release his own music album. It was soon discovered where Charles lived, and by checking the cell phone carrier's data, it was revealed that the missing student's phone had been active at that fatal night's location. However, the house was owned by a woman named Lisa Dyke, and the musician was just renting a room from her. The very strange house. When police accompanied by an FBI agent assigned to investigate the girl's disappearance visited the address, the house was empty. They were only able to contact Lisa Dyke by phone as she claimed to be out of state on business. She confirmed that Charles Beltran had been renting a room in her home, but claimed that he moved out a couple of weeks ago, and she had no knowledge of his whereabouts since. Since law enforcement was unable to locate or contact the sole suspect, they obtained a warrant to search the house where he had lived. What awaited them inside was a collection of unexpected and frightening discoveries. The house was in chaos, with disorder and unsanitary conditions prevalent. It seemed as if the occupants had left in a hurry, taking only the most necessary items and leaving everything else scattered around. The kitchen sink was piled high with dirty dishes, moldy food remnants sat on the table, and trash littered the corners. Notably, amidst all this mess, numerous empty bottles of cleaning and detergent products were found scattered around, with traces on the floors and carpets, as if something had been thoroughly scrubbed. In one of the upstairs rooms, a peculiar and even sinister black statue of death, draped in a black cloak and holding a scythe, stood. It could have been mistaken for a quirky piece of decor, but it was set up as a sort of altar with wax candles, dried flowers, and 2 metal bowls. It resembled the Mexican religious cult of Santa Muerte, translated as Holy Death, where a female deity representing death is worshipped. The house and the atmosphere within seemed more than just strange. It felt as if something terrible had happened here, and afterward the occupants hurriedly cleaned up, packed the essentials, and simply fled. To ascertain this, a more thorough examination was conducted using special tools to detect traces of blood. This revealed numerous wiped bloodstains on the floor in one of the bedrooms, in the bathroom, and in the hallway. It was later discovered that the bedroom, where the carpet was practically soaked in blood, belonged to Charles, and it appeared that a violent crime had taken place there. But who was the victim? The missing girl, the tenant himself, or someone else? Despite all attempts to clean the traces, the blood had soaked into the covering, seeped under the baseboards, stained the wallpaper and furniture. Experts compared the found traces with Marisela's DNA, and any last doubts were dispelled. The blood belonged to the girl. The house was sealed as a crime scene, but now the task was to find the main suspect, possible accomplices, and witnesses. This task was not easy. As it turned out, Charles had fled, and the owner, even before the police visit, had hastily put the house up for sale. Therefore, the police decided to learn as much as possible about everyone who had recently lived in this house. The love triangle. Neighbors revealed that 3 people lived in the house: 57-year-old Lisa Dyke, 48-year-old Nina Morano, and 31-year-old Charles Beltran. However, the nature of their relationship and their sudden disappearance remained unclear. It was necessary to investigate each individual's background and find and interrogate them as soon as possible. The house owner, who was the only one reachable by phone, had worked many years as a lawyer, known as a commanding, ambitious, and quite contentious woman. She had been married 3 times, and after becoming a widow several years ago, received a substantial inheritance. There was no financial necessity for her to rent a room to some guy, nor was Lisa known for her charity, suggesting she had some other interest in the matter. The young black man named Charles, or simply Chuck, Beltran, dreamed of making it on the music scene to build a rap career, but he lacked both money and connections, and his criminal past hindered him. However, about a year ago, he met Dyke, who moved him into her house, helped set up a small recording studio there, and even sponsored the filming of several music videos for the aspiring rapper. Moreover, she even bought him a car, paid for his entertainment, and fashionable clothes, while insisting that their relationship was strictly business, and she saw great potential in this talented young man. The money she spent on him was an investment. The situation with Nina Morano was even more intriguing. She and Lisa had been in an intimate relationship for a long time, and after Dyke became a widow, she stopped hiding her affair with her lover. Moreover, several months ago, the women officially legalized their union by getting married. Nina moved into her spouse's house, where Charles was already living. According to a close friend of hers, Lisa had an intimate relationship with the young musician. Although she vehemently denied this, she secretly told her friend how amazing a lover he was. Apparently, she was in love with him because after their relationship began, Dyke desperately tried to look younger. She lost 55 pounds, changed her image, started wearing bright makeup, and even got several colorful tattoos. Most importantly, she evicted her own children from the home, who in her view were already grown enough and interfered with her personal life. Clearly, Chuck also had a vested interest in living with a wealthy, albeit older lover, as she solved all his financial problems and helped him build a music career. However, he was a noticeable, attractive man in good physical shape, so women did not ignore him. He often engaged in fleeting flings with young women, which drove Lisa insane with jealousy. But what role did Nina Morano play in this whole story, and specifically in the case of Marisela's disappearance? According to the same close friend, Lisa's spouse was part of this strange love triangle and was the only woman with whom Dyke not only allowed her young lover to sleep, but even insisted on it. Nina was also a successful lawyer and a very affluent woman. Thus, this trio lived in pleasure, sparing nothing. Interestingly, after their wedding, both women took the boy's last name, so the house was occupied by Charles, Lisa, and Nina Beltran. Where did the house's inhabitants vanish to? It was discovered that since the student's disappearance, no one had been seen at the house where her blood was found. Lisa was only contacted once. She answered a few questions, stated she was in another state, and thereafter her phone went unanswered. Nothing was known about the fate and whereabouts of Nina, as well as the main suspect, Charles. By tracking mobile phone signals, it was determined that on the night of October 5th, all three inhabitants, as well as the missing Marisela, were in the house. By early morning, their device signals had moved to a suburban area of Dallas, in a fairly deserted, wooded area. Then the signals disappeared, and a few days later, Lisa only responded from her second work phone, which later also became unreachable. The mutilated remains. Using geolocation data from the mobile devices, the route taken that night by the sought-after group was traced, and the stops they made were identified. It was presumed that somewhere in this area, they might have disposed of the missing student's body. This defined a broad search radius, but the area was vast and difficult to navigate, so progress was slow despite efforts. Closer to the new year, the search operation was halted as neither the body nor any clues were found. However, in March 2021, a local hunter wandering through the woods stumbled upon a human skull that appeared relatively fresh. He promptly reported his find to the police, and the remains were soon brought to a forensic laboratory for necessary examinations. Dental records confirmed that the body belonged to the Seattle student who had been missing for nearly half a year. However, the advanced state of decomposition and damage caused by wild animals made it impossible to establish the exact cause of death. Notably, several characteristic marks on the bones suggested knife wounds, but it was unclear whether these were the fatal injuries. The arrest of the first suspects. Soon after the grim discovery in the forest, authorities managed to track down Lisa, who had moved to Florida with Nina and rented a house in Miami by the ocean. Unfortunately, only Nina could be apprehended, while her spouse, learning about the situation, hurriedly went into hiding. There were no traces of Charles, although he periodically communicated with former girlfriends via messengers. In her last correspondence, Dyke mentioned that the young woman's body had been found and warned everyone to be extremely cautious as the police were on their trail. Nina, now incarcerated, refused to provide any information, claiming she knew nothing about Marisela's fate. Meanwhile, Lisa, using all her connections, attempted to hire a good lawyer for her spouse. It also emerged that while in Florida, Nina had put her house in South Carolina up for sale, trying to liquidate it as quickly as possible. It was likely that the women needed the money to continue hiding or to leave the country altogether. A month later, authorities successfully located and arrested Lisa, after which both women were transported back to Dallas. Initial interrogations yielded no results, and a bail of $500,000 was set for each suspect. They managed to post the significant amount and were released under house arrest. However, the women were fitted with tracking bracelets, which allowed their whereabouts to be monitored. A bold escape attempt. In August of the same year, police traced Charles to Utah, hiding at the house of one of his ex-girlfriends. The woman, who was raising a 5-year-old son fathered by Beltran, was so pleased that the child's father had returned to her that she didn't question the reasons for his unexpected decision. The arrested man initially refused to testify or cooperate with the police. He still hoped that his wealthy lover, using her money and connections, would hire a good lawyer for him and help him avoid prison, but soon the situation drastically changed. On Christmas Eve of December 2021, the tracking bracelets worn by Lisa and Nina, who had been released on bail, suddenly went offline. Due to holiday chaos and high activity, it took until the next day to send a squad to their location, but by then, the suspects were nowhere to be found. It soon turned out that they had been meticulously planning their escape for months, and by the time the police went after them, they had already illegally crossed the border into Mexico. From there, they flew to South Korea, and their trail was lost in Cambodia. The FBI was once again involved in the investigation, working with the Cambodian police and immigration services to track down the fugitive suspects. The women came under law enforcement's radar after withdrawing a large sum of money from an ATM. They tried to pay in cash everywhere to avoid revealing their whereabouts. ATM cameras helped identify the fugitives, and another camera on a neighboring building captured the license plate number of the car they arrived in. This information led to the driver, who took the police to the house rented by the extravagant foreigners. The women were rearrested and extradited to the U.S. in February 2022, where justice was to be served. This time, bail was denied, and they were sent directly to jail. Charles's candid confessions. By then, Chuck had fully realized that his lover was not going to save him from prison and was only concerned about herself, leading him to express a desire to cooperate with the investigation and start providing information. His account of the events of that dreadful night horrified many. Beltran confessed that he had been in an intimate relationship with the homeowner, Lisa, and her spouse, Nina. According to him, he engaged in these relationships for money and the opportunity to advance his music career. He harbored no warm feelings towards these women and often indulged in affairs with young and attractive women, which he never hid. While Nina was indifferent to his actions, Lisa sometimes became wildly jealous. On the fateful night of October 5th, 2020, Chuck met a young student named Marisela at a nightclub. The beautiful, slender girl immediately caught his attention, and it seemed he caught hers as well. After spending several hours drinking cocktails and dancing, he invited her over, and she agreed. When they arrived at his place late at night, Nina and Lisa were already asleep, so Charles easily took the girl to his room. There, the couple engaged in intimate activities and later fell asleep. According to the suspect, in the middle of the night, Lisa entered his room, and seeing the young beauty asleep next to him, flew into a jealous rage. She went to the kitchen to grab a large knife, then returned and leaped onto Marisela, repeatedly striking her. Charles claimed he was awakened by the noise and was disoriented at first, still somewhat intoxicated. When he finally turned on the light, he was confronted with a horrific scene. Marisela's body had slid to the floor next to the bed, where she had bled out. At that moment, Nina entered the room. They just stood there for a few minutes, and nobody attempted to help the victim. When Chuck regained his composure, he realized that the crime might be pinned on him since he had a criminal record, and his influential lovers could escape punishment. That's why, he said, he agreed to help dispose of the body and cover up the crime. Charles stayed with friends for several days, and when he returned to collect his belongings, he noticed that the blood stains on the floor and carpet had nearly disappeared. Lisa told him that she and Nina had taken care of everything and destroyed the evidence of the crime. Nevertheless, all three decided it was best to leave town for a while and watch from afar what would happen next. Lisa Dyke Beltran's version. Lisa's lawyer insisted that his client had no motive to attack the girl and take her life. She claimed that her relationship with Chuck was strictly business, and she viewed his promising music career as a good investment. Who he slept with or flirted with never concerned her. As a key argument, the defender pointed out that Dyke had recently entered into marriage and was happy with Moran. However, no one could explain why, after their wedding, the women suddenly decided to take the surname of the young lodger, who, according to them, meant nothing to them. At the trial, Lisa claimed that Charles was hot-tempered and very cruel, and when drunk, he became a beast, whom she feared. According to her, that night he brought a new girl from the club, but after they became intimate, an argument erupted, and Chuck, in a fit of rage, grabbed a knife. She and Nina ran to the noise and tried to separate the couple, but it was too late. Marisela was dead. They helped dispose of the body and clean up the scene under the threat of becoming his next victims. Witness testimonies. Lisa's friend, who testified in court, claimed that Lisa was literally obsessed with Chuck and had repeatedly confessed to her an uncontrollable desire to eliminate any girl who got close to her young lover. Clearly, she was unable to manage her emotions that night. Additionally, the witness mentioned the odd statue of Santa Muerte at her friend's house. She recalled being surprised by the improvised altar during a visit, but the homeowner jokingly claimed she was into black magic and knew how to cast a spell to ensure a man could only have eyes for her. However, it seems the ritual failed, and the woman resorted to using a knife. Another witness, a real estate agent approached by the women shortly after the incident, testified that they were eager to sell several properties they owned as quickly as possible. They also wanted to put their Dallas home on the market, but since it was the site of the alleged crime, they couldn't while the investigation was ongoing. The situation escalated when the remains of the missing girl were discovered, after which Lisa and Nina were ready to sell the property at half price just to get the money quickly. Trial and sentences. The court took into account Charles's full confession and his cooperation with the investigation. However, the situation for the fugitives worsened after their attempt to flee to another continent. In March 2023, Lisa Dyke Beltran was found guilty of the brutal crime against 23-year-old Marisela, concealing evidence and attempting to flee. She was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. As for Charles Beltran and Nina Moran, they fully admitted their guilt and agreed to cooperate with the investigation. They were only found guilty of concealing evidence. Nina was sentenced to 7 years in prison, but could be released in 3 years due to good behavior. Charles, previously convicted on multiple occasions, was sentenced to 12 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after serving 8 years. Thanks for watching, guys. Subscribe to my channel. There are many shocking stories ahead of you.